Election cycles and polling numbers seem to go hand in hand, at least for national races. Who's outpacing whom in a local election, though, hasn't really been the standard here in Idaho. But that appears to be changing for at least one City of Trees contest. Just today, polling data was released in the race to be Boise's next mayor. And the results may not surprise you, but you might be surprised to hear who paid for it and what the poll tells us. Joe Paris tells us about it.
In a little more than 6 weeks, Idaho's capital city will elect a new mayor. Two frontrunners right now, incumbent Mayor Lauren McLean and retired Boise Police Chief Mike Masterson. Who will win? Well, that's why we have elections, so tune in on November 7th. But before that, a real interesting development that happened just earlier. A voter poll on the contest was published by the national group Public Policy Polling. The group is recognized for legitimate polling across the country and political races. However, the Mike Masterson for Mayor campaign did pay for the poll, according to a campaign spokesman. So with that in mind, some of the data is tailored to that effort, but here are some takeaways anyways. First, the parameters. Public Policy Polling surveyed 651 likely Boise voters from September 15th to the 16th of this year. The margin of error in the survey is plus or minus 3.8%. 67% of the interviews for the survey were done through text message, 33% over the telephone. So, in the initial horse race question, as the survey phrases it, McLean polls at 40% and Mr. Masterson at 27%. When asked about favorability, respondents indicated that McLean is even, with voters at 41% seeing her as favorable and 41% as unfavorable, 17% unsure. Masterson saw 28% favorable and 23% unfavorable, with 49% unsure. A major piece of data here, 28% of those polled are currently undecided. Boise State politics expert Dr. Stephanie Witt says the polling appears to be impressive.
So it wasn't just a quick call. It sounded like a fairly extensive polling effort.
When you think, historically about some of the Boise mayoral races, and, I'd never seen a public poll. I mean, what does that say to you?
I have never seen a poll in a Boise mayor's race. Now, that doesn't mean that someone didn't commission one and use the results internally to the campaign, but I've never seen one.
The survey indicates that after going through positive and negative messaging to respondents, McLean's lead shrinks from 13 to 4 points. Again, the Masterson campaign funded the survey, so questions could be tailored to a beneficial outcome. I asked Dr. Witt about the political strategy of releasing a poll like this. A big key, showing it's a real race.
That's how I would interpret the usefulness of a poll like this, to convince donors and of course, potential voters that you're a competitive candidate, you have a shot at unseating McLean.
Dr. Witt says the survey also highlights the overarching dynamic.
Being the incumbent has the advantage of everyone knowing your name. And so you have familiarity, you have name recognition. But being the incumbent means that you're on the hook for how it's going. And people will hold the mayor responsible for things that aren't really directly the mayor's fault or the mayor's ability to control it. He doesn't have that yet, right? So he's relatively unknown, but he's also not having to really bear the responsibility.
Another piece of information that I found pretty interesting in the polling is they identified the two most important issues to Boise voters: crime and safety, public safety, I should say, 15%, and then housing affordability. That was the most important to 19%. And Brian, just to take note here, you and I were talking during the story.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, is 651 a good representation, a good sample size?
It's a sample size. And so just for a little bit of context, in the last mayoral election in 2019 between the former mayor, Dave Beater, current mayor, Lauren McLean, 50,000 people, a little less than 50,000 people voted in that final runoff between the two. So if you were to take, 651 or 652, whatever, divided by 50,000, it is a small percentage. And that's the thing when you talk about polling, is just how valuable is this? For the last several years, when we're following the Boise mayoral races, a lot of the times we'll look at the campaign financing and the fundraising as kind of a metric. This is the first time we've had access to something like this as long as I've been in Idaho. So it'll be interesting to look back at this in 6 weeks and say, okay, how accurate was that? It's a good point you make, though, is because, unless you call everybody on the phone who's going to vote, you don't know who's going to win till Election Day.
I see that spam come up, delete.
That's true. So that's sometimes when they call, that's what this is.
All right. Thanks, Joe.